Mr. Eric Blackledge. He's the president of Blackledge Furniture in Corvallis, Oregon. Founded in 1901, Blackledge Furniture is Corvallis' oldest and largest home furnishing center. Mr. Blackledge has served as the Regional Tax Advisory Chair to the SBA Office of Advocacy and is Chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Council on Tax Policy. And I know from his work in Oregon, an avid proponent of simplification of tax law across the spectrum. Mr. Blackledge.
Thank you, Chairman Schrader and Ranking Member Buchanan, for inviting me to talk today about the simplification of the tax code. There have been many suggestions to simplify the tax system by completely changing our tax structure to a consumption tax, a value-added tax, or a flat income-based tax. But the potential negative economic impacts of the transition make such a major systemic change unlikely in the near future. I will therefore limit my comments to 8 key principles for good tax legislation that could make the current tax system simpler and easier for small businesses and all taxpayers to comply with. I will also suggest priorities for legislation that implements these principles. The details for each proposal are included in my written testimony. Many of these proposals have been supported by committee members and the Congress in the past, and I hope you will continue to support their passage in this Congress. Principle number 1 is to remove outdated and unnecessary record-keeping burdens that don't significantly impact tax revenues. A top priority would be removal of the outdated listed property record-keeping requirements and deduction limitations on business cell phones and computers. Principle number 2, periodically update all dollar limitations and rate breakpoints in the tax code by a single and standardized inflation factor. This could be done with a one-time adjustment for inflation that has occurred since each provision's adoption or last change, and the addition of a standard inflation adjustment provision for all dollar limits in the code that do not have a greater specific adjustment. Examples of this with the provisions needing modernization are the badly outdated $25 business gift limitation and the very poorly written luxury automobile depreciation limitation. Principle number 3, as much as possible, take tax considerations out of the issues involved in choosing a business entity by applying the same equitable rules and offering comparable tax advantages to all forms of business organization. A top priority is the equal and simple deductibility of group health insurance for all small businesses at the entity level. Another priority would be removing the inequitable limitations on small businesses other than C corporations offering a cafeteria benefit plan to their employees. And a third priority would be to correct the inequitable impact for the personal alternative minimum tax on the business income of pass-through entities such as S corporations and partnerships, which are impacted at a much lower level than is true of C corporations. Principle number 4, do not create new tax expenditure benefits and then take them away from many taxpayers through complicated phase-outs, limitations, adjustments, recapture, or a lack of matching exemptions in the alternative minimum tax provisions. A prime example is the ineffectiveness now of Section 1202 small business stock, which is largely negated by the AMT impacts. Principle 5, reduce cost recovery periods in complex record keeping for all small business equipment purchases and facility improvements. Keep the current Section 179 small business expensing provisions, which are a key factor in helping small businesses survive and grow. But recognize that the changing needs of small businesses now would call for the inclusion of non-structural real property improvements under Section 179 property. Principle number 6, provide alternative simple provisions in the tax code that provide equitable tax deduction benefits to small businesses without excessive administrative requirements and costs that often become a barrier to small businesses using a tax benefit. A high priority would be passage, as has been mentioned, of a simple home office deduction and a change of the outdated and unrealistic requirements for physical customer presence and exclusive use that prevents most small businesses from deducting their home office. Principle number 7, reduce the burden on taxpayers to create complex legal arrangements to preserve family businesses for their children. It's important this year that we finally enact the provisions in the recent budget reconciliation for a permanent unified gift and estate tax exclusion of $3.5 million per individual and a maximum tax rate of 45%, while still maintaining the current code provisions intended to help family farms and businesses survive generation transfers. And principle number 8, and perhaps the most important one, is that it is important for Congress to regularly evaluate the actual impacts of the tax system and the financial and regulatory environment on the ability of small businesses to succeed and grow. The Congress and administration should seek broad-based input from small businesses about the problems that they face and the ideas they can develop for improving the small business economy by authorizing a National Small Business Summit on Economic Recovery for 2010. If we are going to rebuild a growing and sustainable economy, government needs to better understand and address the unique needs of the small business community, particularly in the area of taxation and regulation. This year marks the beginning of a new presidency with many new leaders in the administration and in federal agencies and in the Congress. For these leaders to be effective in helping rebuild the small business economy, they need to better understand its needs. Yet it has been over 14 years since the federal government last sought broad-based and balanced input on the problems affecting small businesses through the 1995 White House Conference on Small Business. To implement a restart of this summit process, I ask that the House Small Business Committee add a provision to an SBA reauthorization bill matching the provision that currently exists in the Senate reauthorization bill, which would authorize a National Small Business Summit for Economic Recovery in 2010. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions later.